accidentally ate the pearl in the dumplings that my husband Stephen Chandler made for June Norris, and he directly cut me open to get the pearl. I almost died on the operating table, and he called to ask, "How is it? Have you found it?" June cried herself to sleep. His younger brother Jack was holding the pearl just taken out of my stomach and replied, "Found it. I'll bring it to you later." After saying that, he hastily stitched up the incision on my stomach without any disinfection measures and disgustedly took the knife and wiped the blood clean from my face. I silently shed tears in discomfort. A substitute could never replace the real one, and I didn't want to stand in anymore. I voluntarily disappear, but Stephen went crazy looking for me all over the world. I was weakly lying on the operating table, and Stephen's younger brother Jack, who had returned from studying abroad, was holding a purple pearl in his hand and talking to Stephen on the phone. "Brother, I found it. I will bring her back to apologize to June immediately." Stephen's cold voice came from the receiver. "Okay, hurry back and take care of her wound so she won't die." The pain in my heart at this moment was 100 times worse than the wounds on my body. I knew my husband Stephen Chandler didn't love me, and I knew that his heart had always belonged to June Norris. But I didn't expect that after being married to him for many years, he would betray me for a pearl. On the way back, Stephen arranged for me to lie in the back seat of the car. He drove and mocked me, saying, "Linda, be sensible. Just divorce and get out. Now that June is back, my brother will marry her sooner or later. If you are smart, you should take the initiative to step aside." I weakly forced out a sarcastic smile. He clearly liked June. However, he always thought about his brother and June. Wasn't he just another me? However, this time I really have to get out. I would make room for her, June Norris. When we arrived at the Chandler family villa, Stephen impatiently opened the back door of the car and asked me with disgust, "Can you walk by yourself?" I stood up by myself but almost fell when getting off the car. Jack hurriedly grabbed my arm and made a phone call with a frown. In a short while, Alfred, the butler, came out. I was in so much pain that I couldn't straighten my back, and cold sweat kept dripping from my forehead. Alfred hurried over to help me, while Jack went into the villa first without waiting for us. With the help of Alfred, I moved forward step by step with great difficulty. Stephen couldn't wait any longer. Another call came in. "Alfred, hurry her up, June will fall asleep again soon." After hanging up the phone, Alfred looked at me hesitantly, wanting to say something but holding back. I didn't say anything and could only endure the intense pain while quickening my pace. If I made things difficult for Stephen, then he would make things difficult for Alfred. Alfred had always taken good care of me, and I couldn't let him be punished because of me. Finally, we arrived at the bedroom where Stephen and I used to sleep, only to find June lying on the bed of Stephen and me. She joyfully playing with the pearl Jack dug out from my stomach. This pearl was nothing special, but Stephen bought it when he was still a child and gave it to June. Afterwards, it was lost by June before going abroad, and Stephen found it and kept it. He just wanted to give June a surprise. Nobody expected that I accidentally ate it. Stephen looked at her with a doting expression, occasionally pinching her face, which was 7/10 similar to mine. The love in his eyes seemed to overflow. No, it should be my face that was similar to hers. The two of them immersed themselves in their own world, seemingly completely forgetting that there were other people around. Alfred and I stood aside, quietly watching them. Alfred could only cough to remind them, trying to get their attention. Only then did the two of them turn their heads towards me, as if waking up from a dream. When June saw me for the first time, there was a hint of imperceptible disgust in her eyes. But that disgust quickly disappeared, replaced by a faint smile that was hard to fathom. After seeing me, Stephen showed a familiar displeased expression on his face. He habitually frowned, then said sternly, "Apologize to June immediately." His voice was cold and stern, with an unquestionable sense of oppression. I tightly bit my lip, enduring the pain in my body, and whispered, "I'm sorry." I knew that if I didn't apologize, Stephen would never let me go. He was capable of cutting me open for a pearl. He was now a stranger to. June forced a smile and replied, but her eyes revealed a sense of triumph as a winner. Seeing that I apologized obediently, Stephen didn't make things difficult for me anymore. I followed Alfred to the guest room. He said he would find a doctor to take care of my health tomorrow. After saying that, he reminded me, "You can't touch anything made by Master Stephen from now on, got it?" I nodded with bitterness and sadness. If it weren't for Stephen treating me so well before she appeared, how could I dare to eat the dumplings that he personally made for June? I was basically a substitute bought by Stephen. Our first meeting was at the hospital. He was stunned when he saw me for the first time, murmuring and calling me June. Later, I learned that the June in his mouth was his fiancée. At that time, my grandmother, who was dependent on me, fell seriously ill and had to spend tens of thousands of dollars every day. But as a recent graduate, I had no ability to afford it. I worried so much every day that I couldn't sleep. My grandmother raised me all the way through college by picking up scrap materials. But before I could earn money to let her enjoy her life, she fell seriously ill. The turning point came on the second day after I met Stephen. He asked me to be his fiancée and hold a wedding with him. The condition was that he would fully cover all the medical expenses for my grandmother. Her illness was like a bottomless pit, requiring continuous treatment to prolong her life. I was completely unable to hear it, but I didn't want to leave any regrets for myself. In the end, I agreed to him. After marriage, he treated me very well. Because of my family background, his parents looked down on me, so he didn't invite them to the wedding. The employees of his company whispered about me, so he opened a department to vent my anger. He never treated me badly in life. He would satisfy me with whatever I want. I could say that he compensated for many regrets in my childhood with money. Whenever my face got a little hurt, he would be extremely nervous. His various behaviors made me mistakenly think that he loved me very much. But there was a room in the house that he never let me enter. Until one time, a cat I raised was kicked to death by Jack. I had a fight with him and said I would complain to his brother. Jack sneered and sarcastically told me, "Do you think he really loves you?" I was confused, and he grabbed my collar and dragged me into the room that Stephen never allowed me to enter. It was a dreamlike princess room. The most dazzling thing was the whole wall covered with photos. The girl in the photos looked a lot like me, from a happy childhood to a delicate adulthood. The dense photos made me dizzy. Stephen coldly snorted, "Take a good look. This is the woman my brother loves. You are standing here because you look like June. You even consider yourself as my sister-in-law. Let me tell you, you are not worthy." Since then, I have gradually distanced myself from Stephen. He also noticed something, but he didn't say anything because he didn't need to explain to someone he didn't love. Just a year ago, my grandmother, who had been given 3 more years of life, passed away without any worries. I also decided to leave Stephen, but he wouldn't let me go. He wanted me to wait until June came back before I could leave. I knew very well that I owed him a lot, so I could only stay. Now, June had come back and I had repaid what I owed him. At night, perhaps due to an infected wound, I had a high fever. In a daze, I instinctively called Stephen. The phone connected and Stephen's impatient voice sounded. "Stop calling me all the time. You're an adult. Can't you solve your own problems?" I struggled to breathe as if I were in a steamer. "Stephen, I feel really uncomfortable. Can you?" But what came through the receiver was a complaining and soft voice. "Linda, don't bother him anymore. He has been taking care of me all day and he is already tired. As his current wife, you should understand him." The beep interrupted my last hope, and I felt like a bucket of cold water was poured on me. At this moment, I became slightly sober and quickly called Alfred. Alfred arrived quickly and saw me looking like I had just come out of the water. He was startled and immediately wanted to call Stephen. I quickly stopped him and said that I had already called. A touch of heartache and helplessness flashed in his eyes as he silently held me and walked out. In the car, I weakly pleaded with Alfred to go to another hospital. Alfred hesitated for a moment, but that hospital is farther away. "I'm afraid you won't be able to hold on. The hospital near your home is only 15 minutes away. It's okay, just go to the one I mentioned." "Okay, but you must hold on. I'll drive faster." He didn't insist anymore and stepped on the gas to speed up. The hospital where my grandma lived was owned by the Chandler family. The Chandler family was powerful and influential in this city, with the ability to do whatever they want. Even if they secretly performed surgery on me, I had no choice. I was just an ordinary commoner with no power or influence. If I went to their hospital again, I didn't know what crazy actions Stephen would take for June. When I arrived at the hospital, it was indeed because of the infected wound. If I had come a little later, it would have caused serious organ damage. I hadn't seen Stephen for the next few days. He may have forgotten about me, but Alfred took the time to visit me every day. Alfred also tried to talk to him about my situation, but he always interrupted with disgust, saying he didn't want to hear about me. Stephen remembered me a week later and took the initiative to discuss divorce with me, only to find out that I was in the hospital. When he came to the hospital, he brought June with him. I was also recovering well and was about to be discharged. "Linda, I didn't know you were in the hospital." A rare sense of guilt flashed in his eyes. June quickly hugged his arm and smiled at me. "Sorry, Linda. He has been keeping me company these days, so he didn't have time to check on you. But you also know, we grew up together since we were young, bond is quite strong." After speaking, she provocatively raised her hands, which were interlocked with Stephen's 10 fingers. "So I pretended to be okay with it and I casually tugged at the corner of my mouth. With a faint smile, I said, "It's okay. We're getting divorced anyway, so you two can be together openly in the future." My voice was calm, but my heart was filled with pain and unwillingness. Stephen's eyes flickered with a trace of complex emotions when he heard me say this sentence with an indifferent tone. Then he said, I will compensate you enough to ensure that you will have no worries about food and clothing for the rest of your life. You might also like. I replied with a faint smile, okay, I have already sent you the divorce agreement. Please find some time to sign it. After saying that, I turned around and left. Stephen suddenly stopped me and said, Linda, let us go together. I'll walk you home. I didn't look back and said no. Since I was ready to leave, then I should cut it off completely. Stephen did leave me a considerable amount of property, as he said. He gave me $10 million and a villa in the city center, which was enough for me to live a worry-free life for the rest of my life. On the day I left the villa, June caused trouble again. She cried and asked me if I took the engagement ring Stephen bought for her. Linda, I beg you, I'm about to marry him. Please give me back my ring. It's the engagement ring he had custom made for me. Even if you don't want to give him back to me, don't do it this way. I can give you as much money as you want, just please give me back my ring. I didn't take it. I coldly pushed her away and was about to leave, but was grabbed by a pair of strong hands. If you took it, hand it over. I can give you money, but I can't give you anything else. Stephen still coldly and firmly accused me. I didn't take it and I don't want it. I knew this was another trick played by June. She was really boring. I tried to break free from Stephen, but he suddenly pulled me forcefully towards the house. If you don't hand it over, don't even think about leaving. Stephen, have you gone crazy? I said I didn't take it. I shouted in anger, but my body trembled and I felt scared inside. I was afraid that he would do something to me again, just like last time when he took the pearl. I was locked in the bedroom by Stephen, and he didn't allow Alfred to bring me food and drink, forcing me to hand over that ring. But I don't have it at all. What could I give in exchange? At night, when my hungry stomach was aching, the door was opened and it was June. She smiled and walked towards me step by step. Linda, guess what this is? She raised her right hand, and there was a dazzling gemstone diamond ring on her ring finger. I didn't say anything, just looked at her coldly. She then revealed a sinister smile and said, do you want to know why? I coldly spit out 2 words, I don't. But she went crazy and walked to the side of my bed, grabbing my collar and gritting her teeth. Have you noticed that he has changed during the days you were about to leave? He should be happy about divorcing you. But he didn't. Instead, he showed a hint of reluctance towards your departure. Do you know what he said to me? He asked me if we could postpone the wedding. Do you know how much he desired to marry me before? He desired it so much that he was willing to break ties with his family. You will never understand how much he loved me. His reluctance towards you is just a tactic you use to play hard to get. Do you understand it now? He can trust me unconditionally. Between me and you, he will always choose me. I looked at her like I was watching a clown, and my silence made her like she was punching the cotton. Helplessly and angrily, she left, and I took out my phone and called the police. At the police station, I made a statement, and June was also summoned. She apologized with a smile, saying it was all a misunderstanding. She found the ring, it was in her room. When Stephen hurried over, he saw this ridiculous scene. He stammered and said to me, I'm sorry for making you suffer. I sneered, no need, but I won't forgive you. What I suffered was not never be erased from my stomach. After coming out of the police station, June once again acted and apologized to me. She pleaded with me to forgive her, feeling very wronged. Linda, I really didn't mean it. I thought you would take the ring to ruin my wedding with Stephen. I was wrong, can you forgive me? She looked humble at the moment, completely different from last night. But Stephen just fell for her trick. Before I could say anything, Stephen pulled her into his arms with concern and said to me, Okay, she didn't mean it on purpose. Don't be so stubborn. I'll transfer $1 million to your account as compensation. I accepted it gladly, watching the 2 of them walk away and seeing her turn back to me with a victorious smile. After so many things, I was no longer angry. Maybe I didn't love him anymore. Only when I didn't love and didn't care, they wouldn't affect my emotions. In the next few days, I sold the villa that Stephen gave me. Then, I packed my bags and left the city, away from Stephen, away from everything related to him. I took a plane and flew half of my country, and finally settled in a picturesque courtyard in the south of the country. When I received news from Stephen again, it was already half a month later. He sent me an invitation and asked me, will you come? I want to have your blessing. My answer was also concise, I don't want to go. The chat box stopped at the other party typing. After a while, he sent a message. Do you really not care about me anymore? I found it ridiculous but still replied, then if I still care about you, can you not get married? Maybe my words choked him, and he didn't reply anymore. But on the eve of the wedding, he suddenly sent me a message, Linda, if you can get along peacefully with her, I can cancel the wedding for you. I coldly snorted and replied, are you suggesting that I become your mistress or that she becomes your mistress? I was shocked by his disgusting remarks and also glad that I had stayed away from a scumbag. Was I a dog that he could summon and dismiss at will? It seemed that he really didn't understand me at all. You don't need to cancel the wedding for me. Instead, I wish you and her live happily ever after and give birth a child soon. Stephen suddenly became angry and said, I will let you continue to be the hostess of our family, but I hope you can stand her a little. She is an orphan with not relatives. She can only rely on me. I didn't have to divorce you, but you told her to take the money and move out. I was afraid that you couldn't tolerate her, so I divorced you. Upon hearing this, I suddenly remembered the day she returned to the country. She was picked up by Stephen in person, and it was captured by the media at that time, causing quite a stir online. The trending post title was Your Crush is Back. Who would you choose? There was no doubt that most people would choose the crush. Before going abroad, June and Stephen were considered a perfect couple in the eyes of others. Later, the Norris family had an accident and June chose to go abroad to escape the grief. She gradually faded out of everyone's sight and Stephen had never been involved in any scandals. Everyone was saying he was waiting for. I found out all these news by searching online overnight after Stephen dragged me into the forbidden bedroom. I sneered, I don't want to be the hostess, and as for June, if you want to marry Het, go ahead. I don't care and I don't want to care. Stephen gritted his teeth and replied, fine, that's fine. Just don't regret it. I have already given you a chance. Obviously, the other party was annoyed by not getting a satisfactory answer and angrily hung up the phone. He always thought that as long as he gave me some benefits, I would obediently go back to him. On the day of Stephen's wedding, because of the return of June Norris, added to the extravagance of their wedding, once again, they had become a hot trend and their wedding video was going viral on the internet. Netizens were saying, it's so sweet, after waiting for so many years, they finally got what they wished for. However, a video of Stephen's elopement was then leaked. He escaped during the exchange of rings. June was so angry that she fainted and the whole scene was in chaos. I was still wondering when Stephen called, panting heavily on the other end of the line and sounding anxious. He asked, where are you? Why did you sell the villa and disappear? Is it interesting? I replied indifferently, what's the matter? We have nothing to do with each other anymore. I don't think I need to report to you wherever I am. After a moment of silence, the other party seemed to compromise and said, I ran away from my marriage for you. If you come back now, you can still be Mrs. Chandler. I will also send June away. You don't need to, by the way. I have some good news to tell you. She is pregnant. You should take good care of her. After I finished speaking, I hung up the phone. I told him that June was really pregnant and I wasn't lying. On the day we moved out of the villa, I accidentally overheard a conversation between June and Jack. She took out a prenatal examination form and said discontentedly that she was pregnant and had been pregnant for nearly 2 months. Jack hugged her excitedly and asked her to leave the child behind. June had only been back in the country for a month, so I was not sure if she had crossed any boundaries with Stephen, but the child she had, after over a month, was definitely not Stephen's. I could only say that the people from his family were really wild. The two brothers were playing with the same woman at the same time. No wonder June went abroad not long ago, and Jack also followed to the same country. It turned out that Jack betrayed his brother and took his woman. Ha. I underestimated Stephen's madness. He started spending a lot of money to find me, and both legal and illegal means were used to locate me, causing quite a stir. As a result, I was kidnapped. The kidnappers threatened Stephen to pay a ransom of $10 million. Stephen anxiously shouted over the phone, begging the kidnappers not to harm him and promising to give them the $10 million. But Jack started arguing with him. Why do you care about what she does? Are you really in love with her? Don't forget that June is still carrying your child. You should mind your own business. You are being too nosy. Stephen seemed to have a hint, and it seemed that he and June had not been exposed yet. Immediately, Jack seemed to grab the phone and shouted at the kidnappers, no, her life have nothing to do with the Chandler family. Don't you that she has divorced my brother. If you want to kill or torture her, do as you please. The phone was hung up and the kidnapper frowned and glanced at me, seeming undecided. The anger in my heart was also ignited by Jack's words. Since it was like this, then let us all not live. I smiled slightly at the kidnapper. If you want money, why don't you kidnap June? She, June Norris, was a childhood friend of the two brothers of the Chandler family. The two brothers of the Chandler family loved her so much that they would rather die than live without her. Capturing her would be more profitable than capturing me, and it would be double the reward. Just as I finished speaking, Stephen called again. He told the kidnapper not to harm me and was willing to pay the money. The kidnapper immediately burst into laughter, claiming that they had made a big profit this time. Their efficiency was also very high. In just one day, June was kidnapped and thrown in front of me. she cried desperately, kneeling on the ground and begging the kidnapper not to tear the ticket. Her men had plenty of money. The kidnapper naturally knew who she was talking about and impatiently kicked her away and left. The air suddenly quieted down, and June also saw me. She laughed at me mockingly. "Linda, just wait for your death. I won't let Steven save you. I still have his child in my belly. You probably don't know, but we did it that night when you were being dismembered." I closed my eyes and prepared to rest for a while, and replied to her calmly, "Don't worry, even if I die, I will drag you down to hell with." When Steven and Jack learned that June had been kidnapped, they rushed over in a hurry. They negotiated with the kidnappers outside, while June and I were guarded in an abandoned building. The dramatic scene was that instead of the expected $3 million when the boxes were opened, there were only a few boxes contained money, while the rest contained hell money for the dead. The kidnapper angrily pointed his gun at our heads and made us choose one. Steven angrily asked Jack what was going on, and he replied, indifferently, "The money was exchanged by me. Linda is not worth $10 million at all. Her life have nothing to do with our family." Hearing this, Steven punched him in the face with a black face and said, "You lunatic, I don't care about the $10 million at all. What I care about is her." Jack wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and smiled as Het questioned Steven, "Don't you want June anymore? Don't you want the child in June's belly anymore?" Steven became silent and June smirked at me. "See, he will always choose me. What do you have to compete with me? Besides, I still have his child in my belly." I smiled as if I had accepted my fate. They all say that family scandals should not be made public. How could he possibly expose such a big scandal in public? After a long time, Steven looked at me with guilt. His eyes were red, and he begged the kidnapper to let him talk to me for a few words. He walked up to me, squatted down, gently touched my cheek, and spoke with difficulty. "Honey, I'm sorry, I have no choice but to choose her. Will you blame me?" I gave a cold smile and said, "It doesn't matter who you choose, it has nothing to do with me. Why should I blame you? After all, we have no relationship at all." For Steven at this moment, it was the fact that I was indifferent and distancing myself from him that hurt him the most. Sure enough, he lowered his head in guilt and dared not look at me. June shouted at me angrily, "Linda, what are you being arrogant about? Is there anything wrong with him not saving you? I am his partner, and besides, I am carrying his child now." As soon as she was about to speak, Steven suddenly shouted at her, "Shut up." Steven's eyes were filled with resentment as he looked at her, no longer carrying the deep affection and indulgence of the past. She looked at his changed expression in a daze, with tears shimmering in her aggrieved eyes. In the next second, Jack suddenly shouted loudly, "We choose June, and the other woman is yours." The robber gave a cruel smile and looked at Steven, asking, "Are you also choosing to save this woman surnamed Norris?" Steven trembled, his eyes were red, and he looked at me for the last time, opened his mouth and said, "Linda, I'm sorry." After saying that, he turned his head and stopped looking at me, followed by a gunshot. I fell down in despair, and I heard heart-wrenching cries in my ears. After death, hearing was the last to disappear. I heard Steven say that he loved me. However, the next second, I found that I had left my body and became a ghost. Steven held my cold body and cried loudly, while Jack hugged June, who was frightened. The robber got the money and was ready to run happily, but suddenly, there was a gunshot, and the robber who killed me fell down in a second. Then, the sound of police sirens echoed throughout the abandoned building. I saw one of the robbers, knowing that he couldn't escape. He suddenly raised his gun and fired several shots at June and Jack. After completing the gun, he crazily rushed towards Steven, who was holding my body and crying in pain. The police who reacted immediately shot him dead, but Steven was still shot and fell to the ground. The scene was chaotic, filled with screams and cries. My soul followed the ambulance, watching Steven, covered in blood, with his eyes tightly closed, murmuring my name. He said, "Honey, Linda, don't leave me. Honey, take me with you, let us go together." I coldly looked at him and really wanted to take him with me, but I didn't have that ability, so I could just wait for fate to take care of him. When we arrived at the hospital, I deliberately floated to June's emergency room, watching her blood slowly drain away, listening to the doctor pronounce the sentence, "dead after unsuccessful rescue." Watching her close her eyes in despair and pain, her last words were, "Steven, honey." Even in her dying moments, she didn't call out Jack's name, but Capers. Unfortunately, Jack loved her so much. Jack was so generous that he gave his wife and children to his brother for her happiness. Jack and Steven were only slightly injured and unconscious. They were rescued, and Jack woke up first. He shouted and insisted on seeing June. But when he saw June, she had already become a cold and stiff corpse. He couldn't even see their unborn child. He instantly collapsed and hugged her body, crying loudly. He cried until he fainted. It seemed that he really loved her. However, her death could also be considered as a punishment for him. The most painful thing was not dying together but being separated by life and death. Stephen's retribution was the same. Maybe he really loved me, but that was better because the more he loved me, the more he would suffer. Stephen kept calling my name in his dream while unconscious, repeatedly saying sorry. When he woke up, it seemed like he had lost his memory. He took out his phone and repeatedly dialed my number, but no one answered. Then he angrily asked Alfred to find me. Alfred, go and find Mrs. Carter. How dare she not answer my call? Alfred choked up and hesitated to speak, but in the end, he didn't say anything, probably because he was afraid of upsetting him. He agreed and walked out. Alfred had watched him grow up since he was a child and understood his behavior and thoughts the most. Once Alfred said that Stephen had fallen in love with me. He said he couldn't be wrong. Because Stephen always asked about my life in front of Alfred, he could tell if I had lost weight. But he said Stephen wouldn't admit it until he figured it out. He told me to wait patiently for that day. At that time, I still had a little fantasy about Stephen's love, but I didn't expect my ending to be so tragic. Jack was devastated by June's death and became crazy. His parents were afraid that he would affect Stephen, who had lost his memory, so they sent him to a mental hospital. Every day, Stephen asked Alfred where I had gone. This situation lasted for a week, and suddenly one night, Stephen woke up and cried out my name. He said he was wrong. My soul had not dispersed for some reason, but when I heard Stephen's apology, my soul suddenly became lighter and lighter. I knew that I should go now. I wished Stephen and I would never meet again in the afterlife. My wife left me. Her name is Linda. She is a very innocent girl. The first time I saw her, I was amazed that there could be someone in this world who looked so much like June. If it weren't for growing up with June since childhood, I would suspect that she and June are sisters. But her personality is completely different from June. She is not at all delicate or affected. She doesn't make trouble for no reason. She is very considerate and tries various ways to make me happy when I'm in a bad mood. She is also very timid and waits for me to go to sleep together every day after work. She still cries a lot, even a small reward can move her to tears. She can't stand any grievances. If I say something harsh to her, she will silently ignore me. She also looks very beautiful when she smiles, even more beautiful than June. Since she came into my life, I no longer miss the one who haunted my dreams, June Norris. But after she entered the bedroom that I forbid her to enter, she changed. She became someone who doesn't cry, doesn't smile, and didn't take the initiative to care about me. She didn't wait for me to finish work and sleep with her. Seeing her like this, my heart suddenly ached. She gradually occupied my heart and pushed away the place of June. Thinking about this, I was afraid again. I was afraid that I would forget about June. I was afraid that I would not love June. June and I grew up together, and I vowed to protect her for a lifetime. But when I finally wait for my dreamy June to return to the country, everything becomes uncontrollable. I don't want to divorce Linda at first. I want to be with her for the rest of my life. I realized that I truly fell in love with her. But one time, Linda accidentally ate the pearl I gave to June. June cried and demanded that I punish Linda. I didn't want to, not at all, but she questioned me if I still loved her. To be honest, I couldn't admit it. After all, I had loved her for over 10 years. I couldn't believe that I didn't love her anymore. So I punished Linda. I had Jack, who had returned from abroad, studying medicine, cut open her belly and take out that ridiculous pearl. I was really despicable. I didn't deserve to love her. Later, I wanted to make amends. But because of my pride deep down, I refused to admit that I truly loved her. I hurt her again and even chose not to save her for the sake of my ridiculous reputation. The despair in her eyes caused me immense pain. In the end, she left. She left me forever. Only then did I have the courage to tell her I love her. But it was all useless. Everything was useless. She wouldn't come back. Epilogue. Stephen, the heir of the Chandler Group, had never married in his life, and Jack, the second son of their family, was missing. V were Y, the two young masters of the Chandler known for their infatuation.